In this video, we are going to talk about simple interest. So what is interest? Interest is the amount that you will earn on an account if you leave money in an account like a bank, like in a savings account for a certain amount of period. The principal is how much you deposit in the bank, and then the bank will give you some kind of interest rate. It could be interest rate that's monthly. It could be interest rates that are daily. So then those would be examples of compounding. When we talk about simple interest, though, we're talking about interest that is earned one time on the account. We have to look at how things are phrased to know how interest is earned. So if we deposit $1,000 in a savings account that's paying 5% interest per year, then the 1,000 is the principal amount. That's how much that was invested initially. And then the annual interest rate is 5%. In that case, it's an annual rate. So that's a yearly rate because it says per year. So we're looking for those keywords to let us know what's going on. So with simple interest, interest is equal to principal times the rate times the time. So I is the interest, P is the principal, R is the interest rate, and you want to write this as a decimal, and then T is your time period. So let's look at a few examples. A is asking us to find the simple interest due on a 4-month loan. Here's our principal amount, 1,175, and it says the annual interest rate is 3.2%. And if I turn that into a decimal, move that decimal 2 places to the left, is 0.032, and then we're going to round to the nearest cent. So notice our interest rate is yearly because it says annual, but our time is in months. So I've got to turn this into years. So I've got 4 months. We're going to use dimensional analysis. We know that there's a relationship between months and years. We know there's 12 months in 1 year. So the months are going to cancel. I had to put the months in the bottom so it would cancel with the months here. So we're going to have 4 in the top divided by 12. And this is going to be in years, which is going to be 1/3. And that's going to be 1/3 of a year. So to find the interest, I is equal to PRT. So my principal is 1175. My interest rate is 0.032. And my time is 1/3. 1175 times 0.032 times 1/3. I got 12.53 repeating, which is going to round to 12.53. So that's the interest that would have to be paid on that loan. Let's look at B. Calculate the simple interest due on a 45-day loan of $1,500 if the annual interest rate is 5.25%. And then again, we're going to round to the nearest cent. So we're going to have to turn that time to years again. We've got 45 days, and we know there's a relationship between days and years. And the reason we want to go the years because our interest rate is an annual interest rate. There's 365 days in a year, but most banks use 360 to compute this. And that's what our textbook is going to do. So when I compute this, I'm going to have 45 over 360. So 45 divided by 360 is 1/8 or 0.125. That's a nice decimal, so I can use that as a decimal because it ends. So interest I equals PRT. Principal is 1,500. Interest rate is 0.0525, and the time is 0.125. I got 9.84375. If I want to round to the nearest cent, I'm going to keep that 4. So that's how much interest would be owed on that loan. So let's talk about future value for simple interest. So the future value or the maturity value is going to be the principal that is put in plus the interest. So if we know interest is I equals PRT, then notice that we can factor a P out there, and that's going to leave us with a 1 plus RT. So I could think about it in any of those 3 forms, where A is going to be the amount after interest. So we could go back to these examples up here and we could figure out what that future value is. So what would be the total paid back? Or they're going to have to pay back in that first example 1175 plus interest of 1253. So 1175 plus 1253 is going to be 1187.53. So that would be the future amount of that loan. And we could do the same thing here, the future amount here. So the total paid back would be the principal plus the interest. The principal was 1,500 here, and the interest was 984. So it's going to be 1,509.84. So that is the future amount that's owed for that loan. Now we could also use those formulas to help us figure out what the interest rate is. So future amount A is equal to P times 1 plus RT. That was one of our formulas we had. And we could actually solve this for any variable. I mean, if we needed to find time, as long as we had the other 3 variables, we could do that. Or if we needed to find the interest rate. So let's look at this one. In 2 years, so there's our time, the future value will be 53.75, and that was if we invest 5,000. We want to know what the interest rate is. So I'm actually going to think about this as if I distribute. So I know A is 53.75, P is 5,000, and rate is 2. So I'm just going to plug everything I know into my formula here. Now we're going to simplify some things. So I've got 53.75 is equal to 5,000 plus 2 times 5,000, which is 10,000, times R. So to solve this, I'm going to subtract 5,000 from both sides. So this is going to be 375 equals 10,000 times R. And then we're going to do the opposite. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So if I divide by 10,000, then R is going to be 0.0375. And we want this as a decimal, so we're going to move this 2 places to the right, which is going to be 3.75%. So there's that interest rate for that one. So that's going to lead us to a discussion about treasury bills. Treasury bills, or we could call them T-bills, are U.S. government securities that have a term. the period of time a purchaser holds the bill, and that is less than 1 year. T-bills typically sold at a discount for the par amount, also called the face value or the maturity amount. For instance, you might pay $990, that's your discounted price, for a $1,000 face value T-bill. When the T-bill matures at the end of the term, then you're going to be paid that $1,000, and that difference between that amount is the interest that's earned, and that interest is going to be a simple interest. So we could use simple interest to help us figure out interest rates of T-bills. So an investor purchases a T-bill with a face value, this is a maturity value, of 500. So that's going to be our future amount. That's what it's going to be worth at the end. And they purchased it for $492. The T-bill is a 3-month bill. We want to know the annual interest rate. And we're going to round to the nearest 0.1%. So our time is in months. We need to convert that. So we know there's 12 months in 1 year. It's going to cancel my months. I'm going to have 3/12 years, which is 0.25. So a quarter of a year. So we're going to use our formula. A equals P plus PRT. So the amount you invest plus the interest is going to be that future amount. We know the future amount is going to be 500. The discounted amount is 492, so that's how much they paid for it. We don't know the interest rate, but we know the time. So we're going to plug in everything we know into our formula, and then we're going to simplify it. So I'm going to start by multiplying that 492 times 0.25. That's going to give me a 123. And then we're going to move this 492. So 500 minus 492 is 8. We're going to divide by 123. 8 divided by 123. So I got 0.065 and some change. We want the decimal to be turned into a percentage. So I'm going to move that decimal 2 places to the right. And when I do that, I want to round that answer to the nearest 10th. So 1 decimal place. And I'm going to end up keeping that 5 there. So they earned 6.5% on that transaction.